The water hit her face like a slap. Cold, deliberate, cruel. Officer Frank Miller stood there, with the hose laughing, watching the new black woman next door gasp as her dress clung to her skin. He thought he'd won. Thought he'd taught her a lesson about knowing her place in his neighborhood. But when Imani Washington wiped the water from her eyes and looked at him, really looked at him, her voice came out steady, almost pitying. "You have no idea what you've just done." Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next will leave you speechless. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far justice can travel. Trust me, you need to see how this ends. You think you're special or something. That's how it started, not with a welcome, not with a handshake, with a question designed to cut. Officer Frank Miller had been watching from his porch for exactly 23 minutes, Imani knew, because she'd been checking her watch. 23 minutes of cold staring while movers unloaded her furniture into the house next door. 23 minutes of him standing there with his coffee, his badge visible on his belt, even though it was Saturday morning, making damn sure she knew who ran this neighborhood. Oakwood Estates. Picture-perfect suburb. Identical lawns, identical mailboxes, identical white faces in every window except one. Now hers. Imani Washington stepped out of her sedan in a cream silk blouse and tailored slacks, her natural hair elegant, her posture straight, 42 years old. Columbia Law degree. 20 years of walking into rooms where she wasn't wanted and refusing to leave until she'd won. She waved at Miller. He didn't wave back. He walked to the property line instead. Planted himself there like a fence post. You buying or renting, not hello. Not welcome to the neighborhood. Just interrogation. Buying. Closed yesterday. Imani kept her voice pleasant. Always start pleasant. Let them show their cards first. Lot of money for this area. Miller looked her up and down, slow and deliberate, the way you'd inspect something suspicious. What do you do? I'm a consultant. And you, police officer. 18 years. He tapped his badge, made sure she saw it. I know every inch of this town, every person, every house, every rule. That must be very fulfilling. It's a responsibility. His jaw set hard, making sure the neighborhood stays safe. Stays the way it should be. There it was, coded language, the kind that left no fingerprints but drew blood anyway. Imani's smile didn't change. Well, officer, I'm a law-abiding homeowner who paid every dollar she owes. I think we'll get along just fine. We'll see. He walked back to his house, but not before studying her license plate, her movers, her boxes. Making a show of it, making sure she understood you're being watched. Imani pulled out her phone and snapped a photo of him walking away. Just in case. Miller started his campaign the next morning. 6 a.m., Sunday. The roar of a lawnmower rattling Imani's windows. She stumbled out of bed, confused who the hell mows their lawn at 6 a.m. on a Sunday, and looked outside to see Miller pushing his mower back and forth along the property line. Back and forth, back and forth. The same 3-foot strip of grass over and over for 20 minutes straight. When he finally stopped, he looked up at her bedroom window and smiled. Message received. Monday morning, she came out for work to find his patrol car parked directly in front of her driveway. Not blocking it, that would be illegal, but close enough that pulling out meant a 7-point turn and the constant fear of clipping his bumper. She photographed it, added it to her file. Tuesday, he stood at his mailbox for 15 minutes while she carried groceries inside. Just stood there, arms crossed, watching. When she finally looked over, he touched his badge again, that same deliberate gesture, and went inside. Wednesday, things got personal. Imani was planting flowers in her front yard, trying to reclaim some peace, some sense that this was actually her home. She wore a simple black sundress, her hair down her hands in the soil. For 30 minutes, she almost felt normal. Then Miller's shadow fell across her garden. Those won't last. His voice came from directly behind her. Imani's heart jumped, but she kept her hands steady in the dirt. Didn't turn around. Excuse me. Wrong soil, too acidic, dead in a week. I tested the pH. They'll be fine. She still didn't turn. You know there's a homeowners association, right? He stepped onto her lawn now, boots crushing the grass she'd just watered. Rules about maintenance. I've read every bylaw. Imani stood, slowly brushed off her hands, finally faced him. My grass is 1 3/4 inches. Limit is 2. Want to measure? Miller's face darkened. You think you're smart. I think I'm prepared. You're something. He moved closer inside her personal space, using his size, his badge, his authority. Let me educate you about this neighborhood. It's mine. 12 years I've lived here. I know everyone. I know everything. And when someone new moves in, especially someone like you, I make it my business to know even more. Someone like me. Imani repeated it flatly, not a question. Don't play stupid. Then don't speak in code. Say what you mean. Miller's mouth opened, then closed. He wanted to say it, she could see it burning in his eyes, but he was too smart, too careful. The badge protected him, but only if he didn't leave evidence. One wrong move, he said instead, voice dropping low. One parking violation, one noise complaint, one blade of grass over the limit, and I'll be right there. That's not a threat, that's a promise. Imani picked up her gardening tools. Get off my property. What did you just... You heard me. Private property, no permission, no warrant. Leave. For 3 seconds, Miller just stared at her. Nobody talked to him like that. Nobody in this town, nobody in this neighborhood, and sure as hell not someone who'd been here less than a week. His hand moved to his radio. The threat was clear: one call, and I can make this official. One call, and it's my word against yours. Guess who they'll believe? But Imani didn't blink, just stood there, trowel in hand, waiting. Miller stepped back to the sidewalk, smiled that ugly smile. Enjoy your flowers, while they last. After he left, Imani went inside and opened a new document on her laptop. Incident log, Officer Frank Miller. She had a feeling it would fill up fast. Binek. Thursday morning, parking ticket on her windshield. Citation, parked more than 12 inches from curb. Imani had measured after parking 8 inches exactly. She'd been careful. She was always careful. She called the violations office. Got the runaround. Earliest court date 6 weeks away. $50 fine if she just paid now and made it go away. She paid. Not because she was wrong, because she was documenting a pattern. Friday brought a cruiser parked outside her house at 6 a.m., then 11 a.m., then 3 p.m. Different times. Same message, I'm watching you. Saturday morning, a noise complaint. Loud music, multiple calls from neighbors. Imani had been out running. Her house had been empty. When she confronted Miller about it, because of course it was Miller who responded, he just shrugged. Got the call. Had to investigate. That's my job. Investigate what? I wasn't home. Maybe you left music playing. I didn't. Well, somebody called. That smile again. Maybe your presence is just disturbing people. And there it was, said out loud. Imani pulled out her phone and started recording. What are you doing? Sharp, aggressive, documenting an officer harassing me without cause. I'm not false parking tickets, trespassing on my lawn, fake noise complaints, and now admitting that my presence is the real problem. Her voice stayed level, but every word hit like a hammer. What would you call that? Miller's face went red, then purple. His hand moved toward the phone. She saw him calculate whether he could grab it, whether he could make the video disappear, but he stopped himself. That would look bad, really bad. Turn it off, Mike, he said quietly. No. I said turn it off. I said no, this is legal, this is my right, and if you're doing official police business, you shouldn't have a problem with it. Stand off, the phone between them, like a loaded gun. Miller finally backed away. This isn't over. I never thought it was. He drove off but parked at the end of the block, just sitting there in his cruiser, watching her house in his rearview mirror. That night, Imani installed security cameras. Every angle, every corner. If he wanted to watch her, fine. But she'd be watching back. At 11 p.m. her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Leave while you still can. Imani screenshot it. Saved it. Texted back, I'm not going anywhere. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound. This house was supposed to be her reward. 20 years of work, of sacrifice, of fighting her way up. She'd earned this. She'd earned peace. Instead, she had a neighbor who wanted her gone and a badge that protected him no matter what he did. But here's what Frank Miller didn't know. Imani Washington wasn't just anyone, and she wasn't fighting alone. Saturday afternoon, 94 degrees. Humidity so thick you could taste it. Imani gave up on unpacking and decided to wash her car, maybe water those flowers Miller said would die. Small acts of normalcy, small ways to reclaim her own space. She was in the garage looking for her hose when voices drifted across the street. Miller talking to Mr. Peterson, the older man 2 doors down. Their voices carried in the still air. I'm telling you, Tom, I don't like it. Miller's voice low and confident. First it's 1, then it's 2, then the whole neighborhood changes. She seems nice enough, Peterson said, but his voice wavered. That's how it starts. Professional, polite, then the family visits, cars everywhere, noise. Before you know it, property values tank and good people move out. Frank, that's not fair. Fair, I'm talking about reality. I've seen neighborhoods flip, I've seen what happens, and I'll be damned if I let Oakwood go that way. Imani stood frozen in her garage hose in hand ice spreading through her chest. She could walk away, pretend she hadn't heard, stay quiet, stay safe. Or she could confront it. She thought about her father, about the stories he'd told her growing up, the neighborhoods that wouldn't sell to him the loans denied. The doors slammed the subtle and not so subtle message you don't belong here. He'd taught her two things: never start a fight, but never back down from one either. Imani walked across her lawn toward them. "Afternoon, gentlemen." Both men turned. Peterson's face went pale with guilt. Miller just looked annoyed. "Private conversation," Miller said. "About me." Not a question. "Don't flatter yourself. You said first it's one. You said the whole neighborhood changes. You said property values tank." Imani's voice stayed calm, but it carried. Neighbors were probably listening. Good. Let them. "I may be new here, but I'm not deaf, and I'm not stupid." Peterson cleared his throat. "Miss Washington, I think—" "Mrs. Washington. And you think what?" "That I didn't hear your friend explain why my existence is a problem." "I didn't say, Miller started. "Say it now then, out loud. Explain exactly what you meant." "I meant that rapid demographic change affects property values. That's economics." "No, that's racism dressed in a suit." Imani felt the anger rising now hot and clean. "I followed every rule, passed every inspection, paid every dollar. This is my home. You don't get to decide I don't belong because my skin color doesn't match yours." "Careful with words like racism." Miller stepped forward, voice going hard. "That's a serious accusation." "And spraying your neighbor with a hose, harassing her for a week straight. What do you call that?" "I call it maintaining standards. You call it power." Imani moved closer too, refusing to back down. "You think that badge makes you untouchable. You think you can do whatever you want." "I think I can protect my neighborhood from people who don't respect it." "I respect it fine. You're the one who doesn't respect the law." Miller's hands curled into fists. "You need to watch your mouth, or what you'll arrest me for speaking truth on my own lawn. I'll arrest you for disturbing the peace. By watering flowers, by existing." Imani felt something breaking open inside her. Her weeks of restraint, years of swallowing pride, decades of being told she didn't belong. "Go ahead, arrest me. I'd love to explain to your chief exactly why you felt that was necessary." Miller's face went from red to white. His jaw muscles jumped. His whole body tensed like a coiled spring. Peterson put a hand on his shoulder. "Frank, let's just—" Miller shook him off and turned toward his garage. For a moment, Imani thought he was walking away. Thought maybe she'd won. Thought maybe he'd finally understood she wasn't backing down. Then she saw him grab the garden hose. "Frank, don't—" Peterson's voice high and panicked. But Miller was already turning on the water, already aiming the nozzle across the property line, already squeezing the trigger. The stream hit Imani full in the face. Cold, hard, shocking. She stumbled backward, gasping, raising her hands too late as water pounded her chest, her shoulders soaking through her dress in seconds. The force stung her skin. Water filled her mouth when she tried to speak, choked off her breath, ran into her eyes until she couldn't see, and through it all she heard Miller laughing. Actually laughing. "How's that feel?" he shouted over the roar of water. "Not so high and mighty now, are you? Not so smart." Imani couldn't answer, couldn't breathe, could only stand there taking it. Feeling her dress plaster to her body, feeling her hair mat against her skull, feeling every ounce of dignity wash away with the water pooling at her feet. Peterson was yelling, "Jesus Christ, Frank, what are you doing?" But Miller kept spraying, adjusting the nozzle wider, making sure every inch of her was soaked, making sure she understood exactly how powerless she was, making sure everyone watching understood who had the power here. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably 30 seconds, Imani found her voice. "Stop!" The word came out like a gunshot. Sharp, absolute, commanding, and somehow Miller did. He turned off the water, coiled the hose back up, still laughing. "Oops, hose slipped. You should probably go inside and dry off, sweetheart." Imani stood there dripping on her own lawn. Her new black dress clung to her like shame. Water ran from her hair down her face, mixing with tears she refused to let fall. Her whole body shook, not from cold, but from rage so pure it felt like electricity in her blood. She wanted to scream, wanted to charge across that property line and show Miller what real power looked like. Instead, she wiped the water from her eye. Really looked at him, and spoke in a voice that came from somewhere deep and certain. "You have no idea what you've just done." Miller's grin was ugly. "Yeah, what are you going to do about it? Call the cops." He tapped his badge, still wet from spray that had bounced back. "I am the cop, sweetheart. In this town, I'm untouchable. I'm the law, and you're nobody." "We'll see about that." Imani turned and walked back to her house. Every step left a trail of water. Every step felt like walking through broken glass. She could hear Miller behind her laughing, telling Peterson, "See, that's how you handle these situations. Show them who's boss. They either fall in line or they leave." She didn't look back, didn't give him the satisfaction, but inside her house, inside her home that suddenly felt more like a prison, Imani locked the door and let herself feel it. Let herself feel the humiliation, the rage, the crushing weight of being reduced to nothing by a man with a badge and a hose. She stood in her foyer, dripping water onto hardwood floors she'd spent weeks choosing. Looked at herself in the hall mirror, hair plastered down, makeup running, dress, ruined, dignity shattered. For exactly 60 seconds, she let herself break. Then she dried her face, straightened her spine, and went upstairs to change. Because Frank Miller had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd assumed she was powerless. Assumed she was alone. Assumed that badge made him untouchable and her invisible. He'd never bothered to ask who she really was. Imani changed into jeans and a t-shirt, towel-dried her hair, and pulled her secure laptop from her briefcase, the one with the encryption she only used for certain work, the one with the state seal programmed into the login screen. She opened her contacts, found the name she needed. Sarah Jenkins, paralegal. Activist. Someone who'd been fighting these battles long before Imani moved to town. The call connected on the second ring. "Sarah, it's Imani Washington. Yes, we met at the conference last year. Listen, I need your help. I've just moved to Oakwood Estates and I've got a situation." She talked for 15 minutes. Told her everything, the harassment, the tickets, the threats, the water. Sarah listened, then said 6 words that changed everything. "You're not the first, not even close." "What do you mean?" "Officer Frank Miller. I've been tracking him for 2 years, 12 families, all people of color, all harassed until they sold and left." Sarah's voice went hard. "He's not acting alone. There's a pattern, a system, and I think I know who's behind it." "Tell me. Not over the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow? Bring everything you've documented." "I'll be there." After hanging up, Imani sat at her desk and opened a new encrypted file. Started typing everything from memory. Every conversation, every date, every threat. Then she pulled up the security camera footage from her new system. Watched the moment Miller sprayed her down from 3 different angles. His face was clear, his laughter was audible, his badge was visible. And in the corner of one frame, she could see Peterson watching in horror, a witness who couldn't deny what he'd seen. Evidence. Solid. Undeniable. Imani saved the files, backed them up to 3 separate secure servers, and sent encrypted copies to Sarah. Then she did one more thing. She pulled up her state government email, the one with senior advisor to the governor. In the signature line, the one she'd been careful to never use from this address, never mix with her personal life. Subject line, confidential. Pattern of civil rights violations requiring investigation. She didn't send it yet. Not yet. That was the nuclear option. The move that would blow everything wide open. First she'd meet with Sarah. See the full pattern. Build the case properly. Then she'd decide how far to take this. But as she sat there, in her quiet house, watching the security footage loop of Miller's laughing face, she made herself a promise Frank Miller thought he was untouchable. She was going to teach him exactly what justice felt like when it finally caught up. Outside, Miller's patrol car sat parked at the end of the block, engine running, watching her house. Let him watch. The hunter had no idea he'd just become the prey. Sunday morning came with rain, the kind that drummed against windows and turned streets into rivers, washing away evidence, washing away sins. Imani watched it from her kitchen window, coffee untouched her reflection, ghostly in the glass. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the water hitting her face, heard Miller's laughter echoing in her skull. Her phone buzzed. Text from Sarah Jenkins with an address, Riverside Cafe, 9 a.m. Come alone. Park and back? Imani arrived 20 minutes early, circling the block twice to make sure Miller's cruiser wasn't lurking somewhere. The cafe was old brick and peeling paint, the kind of place tourists never found, and locals loved because of it. She parked behind the building like Sarah instructed and walked in through the back entrance. Sarah was already there, tucked into a corner booth with a laptop and 3 spiral notebooks spread across the table. She was younger than Imani expected, maybe 30, with box braids pulled back tight and eyes that had seen too much, too fast. She wore a Howard Law sweatshirt and no makeup. When she looked up and saw Imani, she didn't smile. "You look like hell," Sarah said. "I feel worse." Imani slid into the booth across from her. "Good. Means you're taking this seriously." Sarah pushed a notebook toward her. Everything you told me on the phone, I've got 11 other families with the same story, different details, same pattern. Imani opened the notebook. Page after page of handwritten notes, dates, addresses, names. The Martinez family harassed for 6 months until they sold at a loss. The Johnsons cited for violations that didn't exist until they gave up and moved. The Patels, whose teenage son was arrested on fabricated charges and released only after they agreed to sell. Jesus Christ, Imani whispered. It gets worse. Sarah pulled out a map, unfolded it across the table. Red circles marked houses throughout Oakwood Estates. Every single one of these homes was owned by a person of color. Every single one was sold within a year of Miller moving onto their street, and every single one was bought by the same company. What company? Pinnacle Development Group. Sarah's finger tapped the map. They buy homes at 20 to 30% below market value, hold them for 6 months, then flip them for massive profit. They've made over $15 million in the last 3 years just in Oakwood, and Miller works for them. Not officially. That would be too obvious. Sarah opened her laptop, turned it so Imani could see. Bank statements highlighted transactions, dates, and amounts. But look at this. Every time a family sells and Pinnacle buys, Miller gets a cash deposit within 2 weeks. Never the same amount, never from Pinnacle directly, but the timing is too perfect to be coincidence. Imani scanned the numbers. 5,000 here, 8,000 there, once a whopping 12,000. How did you get these? I have sources. Sarah's smile was thin. I also have a friend at the county recorder's office who's noticed something else. Want to guess who handles the property transfers? Tell me. Chief Robert Thompson? The name hit like a fist. Imani sat back, mind racing. The police chief is in on this. Not just in on it, I think he's running it. Sarah pulled out another document, this one a corporate filing. Pinnacle Development Group registered 3 years ago. 3 board members listed. One is Marcus Brennan, local real estate mogul. One is David Chen, retired city councilman. And the third is a shell company called Oakwood Holdings, LLC. Let me guess. Thompson owns Oakwood Holdings. His wife does, technically, but same difference. Sarah closed the laptop and looked directly at Imani. This isn't just one dirty cop harassing neighbors. This is organized crime with badges. They identify valuable properties in transitioning neighborhoods, target minority owners, use police harassment to force them out. Buy cheap, sell high, and split the profits. It's systematic. It's calculated. And it's been working for 3 years because who's going to investigate the police chief? Imani felt cold spreading through her chest. How many families total? That I can prove 37. That I suspect probably double that. Some families just left without reporting anything. Too scared, too tired, too used to the system failing them. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. I've been trying to expose this for 2 years. Sent reports to the state attorney general, the FBI, even the governor's office. Know what I got back? Form letters thanking me for my concern and assuring me they'd look into it. They didn't. They didn't. Sarah laughed bitterly. Because on paper, everything looks clean. The property sales are legal. The citations Miller writes are technically valid even if they're bullshit. And without someone willing to go on record without hard evidence of the cash payments, it's just conspiracy theory. You have the bank statements. Obtained through methods that wouldn't hold up in court. I needed something more. Someone who could get inside, document everything, someone they'd underestimate. Sarah leaned forward. Then you moved in next door to Miller and called me. A woman with resources, education connections, and apparently the spine to stand up to him. Tell me, Mrs. Washington, what do you really do? Imani met her eyes. She'd been careful on the phone, kept her real position vague. But if she wanted Sarah's help, she needed to offer trust first. I'm a senior policy advisor to Governor Mitchell. I specialize in civil rights and community development. Sarah's eyes went wide. Holy shit. Holy shit is right. I bought that house under my maiden name because I wanted privacy. Wanted one place where I wasn't the governor's advisor, just a woman coming home. Didn't expect to move next door to a criminal enterprise. Does the governor know? Not yet. I wanted to understand what I was dealing with first. Imani pulled out her phone, showed Sarah the security footage of Miller spraying her down. But after yesterday, I'm done playing defense. I want to burn this whole thing to the ground. Sarah watched the video, her jaw tightening. That's assault, clear as day. That's evidence, and I've got more. Every harassment, every fake citation, every threat. Imani looked at the map again, at all those red circles marking ruined lives. How do we prove the connection? How do we tie Miller and Thompson directly to Pinnacle? We need someone on the inside, someone who can wear a wire record conversations, get them to admit what they're doing. You have someone? Sarah hesitated. I did. Guy named Marcus worked maintenance at Pinnacle's office building. He was going to plant recording devices, get us evidence. Then 2 weeks ago, he got arrested on drug charges, cocaine in his car during a traffic stop. Let me guess. Officer Miller made the arrest? Bingo! Marcus swears the drugs were planted. His lawyer couldn't prove it. He's looking at 5 years. Sarah's hands curled into fists on the table. That's what happens when you get too close. They don't just destroy your property value, they destroy your whole life. Imani thought about the text she'd received, leave while you still can. They'd probably sent the same message to Marcus, to all 37 families. But she wasn't all 37 families. She had resources they didn't, connections they didn't, and most importantly, she had something Miller and Thompson couldn't predict. I can get us inside, Imani said quietly. How? The governor's office is launching a community development initiative next month. Grants for underserved neighborhoods, housing assistance, police community partnerships. I helped design the program. Imani felt the plan forming as she spoke. What if Oakwood Estates became a pilot location? What if I arranged a meeting with local leaders to discuss implementation? Sarah's eyes lit up. Thompson would have to attend. And Miller would want to be there. They'd see it as an opportunity, a way to influence the program, maybe even redirect funds. Imani pulled up her state email on her phone. I can make the invitation official, make it look like a real chance for them to get their hands on state money. People like Thompson and Miller, they can't resist that. Greed makes them stupid. You'd be putting a target on your back. Sarah, I already have a target on my back. At least this way I'm choosing the battlefield. Imani started typing the email draft. I'll propose a private preliminary meeting. Small group casual setting, just exploring possibilities for funds. Before any official announcement, I'll record everything. And once we have them on tape admitting to their scheme, we take it to the state police. Not the local department. Straight to internal affairs. Sarah was nodding now, momentum building. If we time it right, if we get them talking openly about past deals, about how they've been operating, we don't just stop them, we put them in prison. Imani hit send on the email, carbon copying Sarah. Done. Meeting invitation sent to Chief Thompson, Officer Miller, and Mayor Pearson. This Wednesday at 2 p.m. Oakwood Community Center. Topic: Community Development Grant Opportunities. Sarah stared at her. You work fast. I've been working fast my whole life. It's the only way people like us survive. Imani closed her laptop. Now we need to prepare. I'll need recording equipment that won't be detected. I'll need backup people I can trust if this goes sideways. And I need you to keep digging. Find every connection between Pinnacle and Thompson. Every shell company, every suspicious transaction, every... Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text message. Stop digging or you'll regret it. Sarah's phone buzzed at the same time. Same message. They looked at each other across the table. They're watching us, Sarah whispered. Right now. They know we're meeting. Imani's mind raced. They hadn't been followed, Todd. She'd checked. Which meant either the cafe was monitored or someone had hacked their phones, or do you use the same coffee shop regularly? Imani asked. Yeah, Sarah's face went pale. Oh God, they've been tracking my patterns. They know my routine. We need to leave separately, different exits. Imani stood gathering her things. Don't go home. Find a friend, a hotel somewhere they won't expect. And Sarah, get rid of your phone. Buy a burner. Don't use any credit cards. What about you? I'm going to my office. State building security cameras everywhere. They won't try anything there. Imani pulled out a business card, wrote a number on the back. This is my secure line. Call me tonight from your burner. Sarah took the card with shaking hands. Mrs. Washington, maybe we should... It's too late to back out now. They just showed their hand. That means we're getting close to something they can't afford to have exposed. Imani headed for the back exit, then turned. Be careful. These aren't just corrupt cops. These are men who've built an empire on destroying families. They won't hesitate to destroy us, too. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the sky stayed gray. Imani got in her car, checked the back seat, checked under the chassis for tracking devices, then drove a deliberately random route to the state building downtown. She parked in the secure underground garage and took the private elevator to the 7th floor, where her office was. Her assistant Monica looked up in surprise. Mrs. Washington, I didn't know you were coming in on Sunday. Emergency situation. I need you to pull some files for me. Everything we have on Oakwood Estates, property records, development proposals, any correspondence with local officials. That'll take a few hours. I've got time. Imani went into her office and closed the door. For the next 3 hours, she worked methodically building a case file that would withstand scrutiny. She documented every interaction with Miller, every piece of evidence Sarah had gathered, every connection between Pinnacle and Thompson. At 4 p.m., her desk phone rang. Internal line. Washington. Imani, it's Dan Reeves? The governor's chief of staff. Got a minute? Her stomach dropped. Of course, what's up? Just got an interesting call from Chief Robert Thompson in Oakwood. Says you've been making waves in his town. Says you're causing problems with one of his officers over some kind of personal dispute. Imani's hand tightened on the phone. Is that what he called it? He was very polite, very professional. Said he wanted to give me a heads up before things escalated purely as a courtesy. He's concerned that your position might be creating an uncomfortable situation for local law enforcement. Dan, that's not... I told him I'd talk to you, get your side. His voice was neutral, careful. So I'm asking what's going on. Imani took a breath. This was it. The moment where she either kept quiet and stayed safe or stepped into the open and became a target. I'm being harassed by Officer Frank Miller because I'm black and I bought a house in his neighborhood. He's assaulted me, threatened me, and he's part of a larger criminal conspiracy involving the police chief and illegal property schemes. I have evidence, I have witnesses, and I'm building a case to take them down. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, Jesus, Imani. I know how it sounds. It sounds like you're accusing a police chief of running a criminal enterprise without going through proper channels. Because proper channels have failed for 2 years. I've got documentation showing 37 families harassed out of their homes. I've got bank records showing payments to Miller after each forced sale. I've got bank records obtained how? Imani hesitated. Through sources that might not hold up in court. Imani. Dan's voice went hard. You're the governor's senior advisor. You can't be involved in obtaining evidence illegally. You can't be running vigilante investigations. If there's criminal activity, you report it to the appropriate authorities and let them handle it. The appropriate authorities are the criminals. Then you go to the state police, the attorney general, the FBI, not us. Our office can't be involved in active investigations. Dan, please. I'm sorry, I know you think you're doing the right thing, but you're putting the governor in an impossible position. If this blows up, if your methods get challenged in court, it compromises everything we're trying to do. He paused. I'm going to have to ask you to step back from this. You're asking me to let them get away with it. I'm asking you to do this the right way. File a formal complaint with Internal Affairs. Provide your evidence to the state attorney general. But do it as a private citizen, not as a representative of this office. Can you do that? Imani closed her eyes. She could feel the walls closing in, feel the system protecting itself the way it always did when someone tried to expose rot from the inside. Yes, she lied. I can do that. Good. Take a few days off. Get some distance. And Imani, be careful. These local political situations can get messy fast. The line went dead. Imani sat at her desk staring at nothing. The governor's office wouldn't back her. The state attorney general would take months to investigate if they bothered at all. By the time any official channels moved, Miller and Thompson would have destroyed evidence, intimidated witnesses, and fortified their position. She'd been naive to think the system would help her just because she was part of the system. Her burner phone buzzed. Text from Sarah's new number. Turn on the news, Channel 7. Imani pulled up the live stream on her computer. Breaking news. A woman arrested in Oakwood Estates on drug trafficking charges. Police recovered over 2 pounds of methamphetamine from her vehicle during a routine traffic stop. The camera cut to footage of Sarah Jenkins being led away in handcuffs, her face shocked and terrified. Officer Frank Miller stood beside the patrol car looking directly at the camera, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The news anchor's voice continued. The suspect, Sarah Jenkins, 29, is described by police as a known activist with a history of making false accusations against law enforcement. She's being held without bail pending arraignment. Imani's hands started shaking. They'd done it. Less than 6 hours after their meeting, they'd arrested Sarah on planted charges. Just like Marcus. Just like anyone who got too close. Her office phone rang again. She let it go to voicemail. Monica knocked on the door. Mrs. Washington, are you okay? I'm fine. I need to make some calls. Hold everything. Monica left. Imani waited until her footsteps faded, then grabbed her personal cell and dialed a number she hadn't used in 5 years. It rang 4 times before a woman's voice answered, Agent Liu. Rebecca, it's Imani Washington. I need a favor. A big one. Imani? Jesus, it's been forever. What's going on? Rebecca Liu, FBI Civil Rights Division. They'd worked together years ago on a voting rights case. She was tough, thorough, and one of the few federal agents Imani trusted completely. I've stumbled onto something in Oakwood, organized crime disguised as police work. Forced property sales, civil rights violations, conspiracy involving the local police chief, and they just arrested my key witness on fake drug charges. Slow down. Start from the beginning. Imani did. Told her everything Miller, Thompson, Pinnacle, Sarah, the 37 families. Rebecca listened without interrupting, which Imani knew meant she was taking it seriously. When Imani finished, Rebecca said, "Send me everything you have. Every document, every piece of evidence, every name. I'll open a preliminary investigation." How long will that take? To investigate properly, 6 months minimum, maybe a year. Sarah Jenkins doesn't have a year. She's sitting in jail right now on charges we both know are fabricated. Then we get her a good lawyer. We file motions. Rebecca, they did this in 6 hours. 6 hours after we met. They had drugs planted in her car and her arrested. What do you think they'll do in 6 months while you're investigating? Imani stood up pacing. These men are ghosts. They're protected by badges and connections and money. By the time your investigation wraps up, they'll have destroyed every piece of evidence and intimidated every witness. So what do you want me to do? I want you to trust me. I'm meeting with Thompson and Miller on Wednesday. I'm going to get them talking on record. And when I do, I need you ready to move immediately. Not in 6 months. That day. Imani, that's not how the Bureau works. Then make it work. Because if you don't, people are going to keep getting hurt. Families are going to keep getting destroyed. And the system everyone's supposed to trust is going to keep protecting the criminals. She took a breath. I'm doing this with or without you, but it would be a hell of a lot easier with federal backup. Long silence, then send me everything tonight. If your evidence is solid enough, I can have a team on standby. But Imani, if you're wrong about this, if you've misread the situation, it's your career on the line, not mine. I'm not wrong. Famous last words. Rebecca's voice softened. Be careful. Men like you're describing don't hesitate when they feel cornered. After hanging up, Imani spent the next 2 hours encrypting files and sending everything to Rebecca's secure portal. Every document Sarah had gathered, every piece of evidence, every connection between Pinnacle and Thompson. At 8 p.m., her burner phone buzzed again. Unknown number. They're going to kill her. They're going to make it look like suicide. Get Sarah out now. Imani stared at the message. No signature, no identifier. But the terror in those words felt real. She called Rebecca back. I need Sarah Jenkins moved out of county lockup tonight. Protective custody. Federal jurisdiction. On what grounds? Witness protection. She's a key witness in a civil rights investigation. If she stays in that jail under Thompson's authority, she's going to die. Jesus, Imani, I can't just... You can. You're FBI. Pull rank. Cite federal jurisdiction. Do whatever you have to do, but get her out of there before morning. This is highly irregular. So is a police chief running a criminal enterprise. Make the call, Rebecca, please. Another long pause. Then, I'll see what I can do, but you owe me for this, big time. Put it on my tab. Imani hung up and slumped back in her chair. Her hands were still shaking, her head pounded. Every instinct screamed at her to run to get out of Oakwood, to forget she'd ever bought that house. But she thought about those 37 families. Thought about the Martinez family, the Johnsons, the Patels. Thought about Sarah sitting in a cell right now, terrified, probably wondering if anyone would help her. Thought about her father's voice, never start a fight. But never back down from one either. She wasn't backing down. Wednesday's meeting was in 3 days. 3 days to prepare to set the trap to get everything in place. 3 days for Thompson and Miller to think they'd won, that they'd silenced the opposition, that everything was under control. Let them think that. Let them walk into that meeting confident and careless. Because Imani Washington was about to teach them what happened when you underestimated the wrong woman. She gathered her things, locked her office, and headed for the parking garage. The building was empty at this hour, footsteps echoing in the concrete stairwell. She reached her car, clicked the unlock button, and froze. A piece of paper tucked under her windshield wiper. Imani looked around. The garage was empty. Security cameras covered every corner, but that didn't stop her hands from shaking as she pulled out the paper. Written in block letters. Last warning. Leave town or join your friend in jail. Or worse. She photographed the note, slipped it into an evidence bag she'd started carrying, and got in her car. Started the engine. Checked all her mirrors. Nobody there. Just shadows and concrete and the distant sound of traffic above. But as she pulled out of the garage and onto the street, she couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching her. Couldn't shake the certainty that Thompson and Miller knew every move she was making, knew every call she'd place, knew she was building a case against them. Good, she thought, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Let them watch. Let them worry. Because in 3 days, their whole world was going to collapse. And Imani Washington was going to be the one holding the detonator. Monday morning started with a phone call at 5 a.m. Rebecca Lou's voice was tight with controlled anger. She's out. Sarah's in federal custody as of midnight. They tried to stop the transfer. Imani sat up in bed, heart racing. What do you mean tried piles for these? Thompson called the county jail personally at 11 p.m., ordered them to delay the transfer until morning, claimed there were procedural issues with the federal paperwork. The warden was going to comply until I got my SAC on the phone and threatened to have the entire department investigated for obstruction. Where is she now? Safe house outside the city, 2 agents with her around the clock. Rebecca paused. Imani, you need to hear this. When we processed her out, the intake officer pulled me aside. Said Sarah had been placed in a cell with 3 women awaiting trial for violent offenses. Said it was unusual that normally someone on a first-time drug charge would be in minimum security. They were setting her up. That's what it looks like. One of the cellmates had a shiv made from a toothbrush hidden in her mattress. We found it during the transfer search. Rebecca's voice dropped. Your anonymous tip was right. If Sarah had stayed there another 12 hours, we'd be investigating a homicide. Imani felt ice in her veins. Did you get anything from Sarah? Any additional information? She's terrified but talking. Says Miller pulled her over for a broken taillight that wasn't broken, had her step out of the vehicle, patted her down, then went back to search her car alone. Came back 3 minutes later with a duffel bag full of meth she'd never seen before. His body camera mysteriously malfunctioned during the search. Of course it did. We're testing the drugs for prints. If we're lucky, Miller got careless. Rebecca sighed. But here's the thing. Sarah told me about your meeting on Wednesday. Said you're planning to record Thompson and Miller admitting to their scheme. That's right. Imani, if you do this wrong, everything gets thrown out in court. Entrapment, illegal recording, chain of custody issues. We need to do this by the book. Then tell me the book and I'll follow it. First, the recording has to be legal. In your state, one-party consent means you can record conversations you're part of without telling the other parties. That's good. Second, you can't induce them to commit crimes they weren't already planning to commit. That's entrapment. You can only document crimes already in progress. They've been running this scheme for 3 years. I'm not inducing anything. Third, I need to be there. Not in the room, but close enough to respond immediately if things go sideways. These men have already tried to kill one witness. They won't hesitate to try again. Imani thought about the threatening note on her windshield, about Miller's smile on the news footage, about Sarah sitting in that cell with a shiv-wielding cellmate. How do we do this? The meeting's at Oakwood Community Center, right public building, public meeting. We can have agents in the parking lot in adjacent rooms, even inside posing as community members if we stage it right. Rebecca's voice sharpened with focus. But you need to get them talking specifics. Names, dates, dollar amounts. Vague references to improving the neighborhood won't hold up. We need them to explicitly admit to harassment, property manipulation, and financial conspiracy. They're too smart for that, Thompson especially. Then you make them think they've already won. Make them think you're corruptible, that you're offering to partner with them rather than expose them. Rebecca paused. Can you do that? Can you sit across from the man who assaulted you and pretend you're willing to play ball? Imani thought about her father again, about all the times he'd had to smile at people who despised him, shake hands with men who wouldn't let him through the front door, play along until he could find another way forward. She'd inherited that ability, that survival skill that felt like swallowing glass but kept you alive. I can do it, she said. Then we're on. I'll have a team in position by Wednesday afternoon. We'll wire you before the meeting, give you an earpiece so I can communicate if needed. And Imani, if at any point this feels unsafe, if they threaten you or try anything physical, you say the code phrase and we come in immediately. What's the code phrase? I think we should table this discussion. Simple, natural something you might say in any meeting. But the moment those words come out of your mouth, we breach the room. Understood. Understood. After hanging up, Imani couldn't go back to sleep. She made coffee, opened her laptop, and started drafting talking points for Wednesday's meeting. She needed to sound authentic, enthusiastic even about the fake grant program. Needed to make Thompson and Miller believe she was naive enough to think they actually cared about community development. Her phone buzzed. Email notification from Chief Thompson himself. Mrs. Washington looking forward to our meeting Wednesday. Officer Miller and I have some exciting ideas about how to implement your development program in ways that would truly benefit Oakwood. Perhaps we could meet briefly beforehand to discuss strategies, say 1 p.m. at my office. I'd like to ensure we're aligned before the larger group convenes. Imani read it 3 times. It was a trap. Had to be. They wanted her alone in their territory before the official meeting where federal agents would be watching. She forwarded the email to Rebecca with a single line, "Thoughts." Rebecca's response came back in under a minute. "Do not go. Classic intimidation tactic. Reply that you have a prior commitment, but look forward to the 2 p.m. meeting." Imani typed the response exactly as Rebecca suggested, professional and polite, giving Thompson no opening to push further. His reply arrived 30 seconds later. "Understood. See you at 2. 2 words. But Imani could read the subtext clearly. "We know what you're doing. We're ready for you. This won't go the way you think." She spent Monday preparing. Called a former colleague at the state attorney general's office, got advice on evidence handling. Called another contact at the ACLU, discussed civil rights violation documentation. By evening, she had a 3-ring binder full of precedents, procedures, and strategies. Tuesday morning brought unexpected help. Monica knocked on her office door looking nervous. "Mrs. Washington, there's someone here to see you, says it's urgent. A Mr. Peterson." Imani's stomach dropped. "Peterson, Miller's neighbor, the witness to the water attack. Send him in." Tom Peterson looked like he'd aged 10 years since Saturday. His hands shook as he sat down across from her desk. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "Mrs. Washington, I need to apologize. What Frank did, what I saw him do to you, that was wrong. Dead wrong. And I should have said something right then, should have stopped him, but I was a coward. Why are you here now?" "Because Frank came to my house Sunday night. Told me if anyone asked about what happened, I didn't see anything. Said memories can be unreliable, that sometimes people think they see things that didn't really happen. Said it would be a shame if my property taxes suddenly got reassessed, or if my grandson, who visits me every weekend, got pulled over for a traffic violation that went on his permanent record." Peterson finally looked up and his eyes were wet. "He threatened my grandson, Mrs. Washington, a 17-year-old kid who's never been in trouble in his life." "Did you record this conversation?" "No, I didn't think to, but I'm here now. I'm willing to testify about what I saw on Saturday. About Frank spraying you with that hose, about the things he said, all of it. And I'm willing to testify about him threatening me." Imani leaned forward. "Mr. Peterson, if you do this, Miller will retaliate. Thompson will retaliate. Your life in Oakwood will become very difficult." "It's already difficult. I've lived on that street for 30 years. Watched good families move in and move out. Never understood why until last week when I really paid attention." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "I made a list. Every minority family that's moved onto our street in the last 5 years. Every single one was gone within 18 months. Every single one sold at a loss. And Frank was always involved somehow, a citation here, a harassment complaint, they're always something. You witnessed this pattern? I ignored it. Told myself it was coincidence that maybe those families just didn't fit in, that maybe the neighborhood wasn't right for them." His voice cracked. "I told myself comfortable lies because the truth made me complicit. But I'm done lying. That video of Frank laughing while he hosed you down, I can't unsee that. Can't unhear it. If I stay silent now, I'm no better than he is." Imani picked up her phone. "Mr. Peterson, I'm going to call someone from the FBI. You're going to tell them everything you just told me, and then they're going to put you somewhere safe until this is over. Are you prepared for that?" He nodded. "My grandson's the one who convinced me to come. Smart kid. Told me that being a good man doesn't mean being comfortable. It means doing what's right, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." By Tuesday evening, Peterson was in protective custody with Sarah, and Imani had 2 witnesses willing to testify. Rebecca called with an update. "We've got more. The drug analysis came back on what they planted in Sarah's car. The meth was cut with a specific binding agent that matches drugs seized in 3 other cases, all cases where Miller made the arrest, all cases involving people who were later pressured to sell their homes. Someone in the evidence room has been recycling confiscated drugs to use in set-up arrests. Can you prove that we're working on it? The evidence room clerk is a 23-year veteran named Douglas Hart. Turns out his daughter works for Pinnacle Development as a sales agent. She's made over $200,000 in commissions in the last 2 years alone, way above average for someone her age and experience. Follow the money. Always. We're also looking at building permits. Pinnacle has gotten fast-track approval on every property renovation for 3 years. The building inspector who signs off his brother-in-law is David Chen, one of Pinnacle's board members. It's a whole network. It's a criminal organization with badges and municipal authority, which is why Wednesday is so critical. If we can get Thompson on record admitting to even part of this, it gives us probable cause to seize records, freeze accounts, arrest everyone involved. What if they don't admit anything? What if they're too careful? Then we keep investigating and hope they make a mistake. Rebecca's voice hardened. But Imani, I'm not going to lie to you. Without a confession or direct evidence of conspiracy, this is going to be a long, difficult case. These men have protected themselves well. They've got layers of insulation, legitimate-looking transactions, plausible deniability built into every step. Smart criminals are hard to catch. Then I'll make them not so smart. I'll make them arrogant. Wednesday morning arrived cold and clear. Imani dressed carefully, a Navy suit professional but not intimidating, approachable but authoritative. She needed to look like someone who could be corrupted, someone who might be willing to look the other way for the right price. At noon, Rebecca's team arrived at her office to wire her up. 2 agents, efficient and professional, fitted her with a microphone so small it looked like a button on her blazer. The recording device itself was built into her briefcase, disguised as a battery pack for her laptop. "Test, test," Imani said softly. In her ear, Rebecca's voice came through crystal clear. "Copy that. We've got perfect audio. Remember, keep the briefcase on the table. Don't let them move it. And if anything feels wrong, use the code phrase." "I think we should table this discussion." "Perfect. We'll be in a van across the street and have 2 agents inside the community center posing as maintenance staff. You'll never see them, but they'll be close." Rebecca paused. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified, angry, ready." "That's the right combination. Use the anger. Let them see it a little makes you seem more authentic, but keep the terror hidden. They'll use fear against you." At 1:30 p.m., Imani arrived at Oakwood Community Center. The building was modest brick and glass, a place where neighborhood meetings and youth basketball leagues happened. Under different circumstances, it would have felt welcoming. Today, it felt like a gladiator arena. Mayor Douglas Pearson was already there, a soft-looking man in his 60s with a politician's smile and nervous eyes. "Mrs. Washington, such a pleasure. We're delighted you're considering Oakwood for this pilot program." "Thank you for making time, Mayor. I think this could be really beneficial for the community." "Oh, absolutely. Chief Thompson and Officer Miller should be here any moment. They've been very involved in community development initiatives." "I bet they have," Imani thought. Thompson arrived at 1:55 p.m., and the moment he walked in, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. He was tall, silver-haired, with a handshake that crushed bones and eyes that calculated everything. He wore his dress uniform, every metal polished, every line crisp. "Mrs. Washington, I've heard so much about you." "All good, I hope?" "Impressive, certainly. Senior advisor to the governor at your age, that's quite an accomplishment. Your parents must be very proud." The comment hung in the air, seemed innocent, but felt like an assessment, maybe even a threat. "We know about your family. We can reach them if we need to." "They are," Imani said evenly. "They taught me the value of public service." Public service is a noble calling, though sometimes it requires understanding the complexities of local situations. Things aren't always as simple as they appear from the state capitol. "I'm learning that." Miller arrived at 2 p.m. exactly still in uniform, his presence filling the doorway like a wall. When his eyes met Imani's, she saw recognition and something else, satisfaction. He thought he'd broken her, thought the water attack had put her in her place. He was about to learn how wrong he was. "Shall we sit?" Thompson gestured to a conference table. They arranged themselves with Thompson at the head miller to his right, the mayor to his left, and Imani across from Thompson. She set her briefcase on the table angled so the hidden microphone would catch everything. Thompson folded his hands on the table. "Mrs. Washington, before we begin, I want to address the elephant in the room. I understand you and Officer Miller have had some neighborly friction." "Friction is one word for it." "Frank tells me there was an incident with a garden hose. An accident, he says, but one that clearly upset you. On behalf of the Oakwood Police Department, I'd like to apologize for any misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. The word was so carefully chosen, so perfectly designed to minimize and dismiss. "An accident," Imani repeated, keeping her voice neutral. Miller leaned forward. "I was watering my lawn. Hose slipped. I tried to apologize at the time, but you seemed too angry to listen." In her ear, Rebecca's voice, "Stay calm. Let him dig deeper." "I appreciate the apology," Imani said, and watched Miller's shoulders relax slightly. He thought she was backing down, thought she'd decided to play along. "These things happen between neighbors. I'm more interested in discussing the future than dwelling on the past." "Music to my ears." Thompson smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. So tell us about this grant program. The mayor mentioned substantial funding for community development. Imani opened her laptop, pulled up a fake presentation she'd spent 2 days creating. The governor's office has allocated $10 million for the Neighborhood Revitalization Initiative. We're looking for a pilot location to demonstrate how strategic investment can improve property values, reduce crime, and strengthen community bonds. 10 million. The mayor's eyes lit up. That's significant. It is, but it requires the right partnerships. Local law enforcement cooperation is essential. We need police who understand the communities they serve, who can help identify properties that would benefit most from renovation assistance. She looked directly at Thompson. Properties that might otherwise fall into disrepair or attract problematic elements. Problematic elements, Thompson repeated. You mean crime-drug activity? Among other things. Properties that bring down neighborhood values. Properties that might be better served by new ownership that shares the community's vision. The silence that followed was heavy with calculation. She'd just given them an opening, suggested that moving certain people out and bringing better people in was part of the plan. She'd spoken their language. Thompson leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Washington, I appreciate your frankness. Too many state programs come with strings attached, politically correct requirements that don't reflect on-the-ground reality. It's refreshing to hear someone who understands that sometimes improving a neighborhood requires tough decisions. I'm a pragmatist, Chief Thompson. I want results, not optics. Then let me be equally pragmatic. Thompson glanced at Miller, who gave a slight nod. Oakwood has been dealing with demographic shifts that have created challenges. Certain families move in property. A maintenance declines, complaints increase. The neighborhood suffers. Frank and I have developed strategies to address these issues, but they require resources and support. What kind of strategies? Miller spoke up. Strict code enforcement. Aggressive patrol presence, making sure people understand the community standards and either meet them or move somewhere more suitable. Imani forced herself to nod. And has that been effective? Very effective. Thompson pulled out his own folder, slid it across the table. Over the past 3 years, we've maintained property values in Oakwood while surrounding areas have declined. We've reduced crime complaints by 40%. We've preserved the character of the neighborhood. Imani opened the folder. Inside were statistics charts, before and after photos of houses. All of it carefully curated to tell a story of success. None of it mentioned the 37 families driven out. These results are impressive, she said. How did you achieve this partnership with key stakeholders? Pinnacle Development, for instance, has been instrumental. When properties fall into disrepair, they step in, renovate, and ensure new owners understand the community expectations. Pinnacle Development, I'm not familiar with them. Local company, very community-focused. In fact, they'd be an ideal partner for your grant program. Thompson leaned forward. Here's what I'm proposing, Mrs. Washington. Your $10 million combined with Pinnacle's expertise and our department's enforcement capabilities could transform Oakwood into a model community. We identify target properties, provide incentives for current owners to sell Pinnacle handles. The renovations we ensure the new residents maintain standards. Everyone wins. In her ear, Rebecca's voice was urgent. He's admitting to forced sales. Keep him talking. When you say incentives for current owners to sell, Imani asked carefully, what exactly does that entail? Standard municipal tools. Code violations permit issues tax assessments. Sometimes people need a little push to recognize when a property isn't right for them. Thompson's smile widened. Frank here is particularly skilled at helping people reach that conclusion. Miller grinned. I just enforce the law, Chief. If people can't follow simple neighborhood rules, that's on them. And if they still don't sell, then the city has options. Property liens, condemnation proceedings, quality of life enforcement. Thompson spread his hands. It's all perfectly legal, all documented, but it motivates people to make smart decisions. Smart decisions meaning selling at below market value to Pinnacle. Market value is what someone's willing to pay. If a property has multiple code violations, if the owner has outstanding fines, if there are concerns about criminal activity, Thompson glanced at Miller, then the market value adjusts accordingly. Pinnacle offers fair prices given the circumstances. Circumstances you create. The temperature in the room shifted. Thompson's smile faded. The mayor cleared his throat nervously. That's a harsh way to phrase it, Thompson said slowly, but accurate. Mrs. Washington, I'm not sure I like your tone. Imani made herself laugh, made it sound nervous. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend. I'm just trying to understand the process so I can properly document it for the state. Obviously, everything needs to be above board. Of course it's above board. Everything we do is legal. Even the cash payments Officer Miller receives after each sale. The silence was absolute. Miller's hand moved to his belt. The mayor went pale. Thompson's face became stone. "I don't know what you're talking about," Thompson said, but his voice had gone flat, dangerous. "Sure you do. 5,000 here, 8,000 there, once 12,000. Every payment coming within 2 weeks of a Pinnacle purchase. Every payment coinciding with a family being forced out of their home." Imani pulled her own folder from her briefcase, slid it across the table. "I've documented 37 families, Chief Thompson. 37 families harassed, threatened, and driven out so you and your cronies could profit." Thompson stared at the folder without opening it. When he looked up, all pretense of civility was gone. "You're making serious accusations without evidence." "I have plenty of evidence, bank records, witness testimony, video footage of Officer Miller assaulting me, documentation of harassment against every family on that list. And as of 2 minutes ago, the FBI has been recording every word of this conversation." Rebecca's voice in her ear, "Stand by, moving in now." Thompson stood slowly. Miller's hand was on his gun now, not drawing it, but resting there ready. "You think you're smart," Thompson said quietly. "You think you've caught us, but all you've done is talk yourself into a very dangerous situation." "Is that a threat, Chief?" "It's a reality. You're in my town, my building, with my officers. You really think some recording is going to save you?" The mayor was backing toward the door. "Chief, maybe we should—" "Shut up, Douglas." Thompson never took his eyes off Imani. "Mrs. Washington, you're going to give me that recording device. You're going to hand over every piece of evidence you think you have. And then you're going to leave Oakwood and never come back. That's how this ends well for you." "No?" Imani stood too, facing him across the table. "Here's how this actually ends. The FBI has been listening to every word. They have agents surrounding this building right now. In approximately 30 seconds, they're going to come through that door and arrest you for civil rights violations, conspiracy, extortion, and accessory to assault. You're done, Thompson. Your career is over. Your criminal enterprise is finished." "You stupid—" Miller moved around the table, hand fully on his weapon now. Imani spoke clearly. "I think we should table this discussion." The door burst open. 4 agents and FBI windbreakers flooded and weapons drawn. "FBI hands where we can see them." Miller's hand moved toward his gun. Bad decision. An agent tackled him before he could draw, slamming him face first into the conference table. The sound was wet and satisfying. Thompson remained standing, hands raised, his face a mask of cold fury. "This is illegal entry. You have no jurisdiction. We have probable cause based on credible witness testimony and recorded admission of conspiracy." Rebecca Liu walked in behind her team, holding up her badge. "Chief Robert Thompson, you're under arrest. Officer Frank Miller, you're under arrest. Mayor Pearson, stay right where you are." The mayor was crying. Actually crying. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about any of this. I just signed papers they told me to sign. Then you'll have a chance to explain that to a federal judge." Rebecca turned to Imani. "You okay?" "I'm okay." "You did good. We got everything." They handcuffed Thompson and Miller. "Read them their rights. Walk them out of the community center into a parking lot full of police vehicles, federal agents, and 3 news crews that had been tipped off anonymously about a major arrest." Imani watched from the doorway as Thompson and Miller were loaded into separate vehicles. Miller's face was bleeding from where he'd hit the table. His eyes found hers through the car window, and the hatred there was pure and absolute. She didn't look away. She wanted him to see her face, wanted him to understand exactly who had brought him down. The neighbor he'd thought he could intimidate. The woman he'd sprayed with a hose. The person he'd dismissed as powerless. Thompson maintained his composure until they shut the car door. Then through the window, she saw his facade crack. Saw him realize what he'd lost: his career, his freedom, his untouchable status. Rebecca walked over to Imani. "We're executing search warrants on Thompson's home, Miller's home, and Pinnacle Development's offices as we speak. We'll have the evidence room clerk in custody within the hour. This is going to be a massive case." "What about Sarah and Peterson?" "They're safe. They'll need to testify eventually, but we've got enough to hold Thompson and Miller until trial." Rebecca looked at the scene agents everywhere, reporters shouting questions, neighbors gathering on the sidewalk. "You just took down a criminal enterprise that was operating for 3 years. That's going to make waves." "Good, let it make waves. Let every corrupt cop in every small town know that they're not untouchable, that eventually someone will stand up to them." "You sound like an idealist." "I am an idealist, with really good documentation skills." Rebecca laughed. Then her expression sobered. Imani, this isn't over. Thompson and Miller have lawyers. They're going to fight. They're going to claim entrapment, illegal recording, federal overreach. The trial could take years. Then I'll be there for years. I'm not going anywhere. Even after everything they've done, you're still going to live next door to Miller's house. Imani looked back at the community center, thought about her house 2 miles away, thought about all the families who'd been forced to leave. Especially after everything they've done, someone has to stay. Someone has to prove that they didn't win. That night, Imani sat in her living room with all the lights on watching the news coverage. Every channel was running the story massive corruption scandal in Oakwood police chief, and an officer arrested FBI investigation expanding. Her name was mentioned, though reporters seemed unsure of her exact role. Some called her a whistleblower, others said she was an undercover state investigator. One channel identified her as a concerned citizen who refused to be intimidated. That last one felt most accurate. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, expecting another threat, another warning to leave town. But when she picked up, the voice on the other end was elderly female and crying. Mrs. Washington, my name is Rosa Martinez. My family was forced to sell our home in Oakwood 2 years ago. I just saw the news. I just saw that officer being arrested. Is it true? Did they really get caught? Yes, Mrs. Martinez, it's true. Thank God, the woman sobbed. My husband died last year. The stress of losing our home, the harassment, it broke his heart. Literally broke his heart. The doctor said it was genetic, but I knew better. I knew what they did to us killed him. Imani's own tears started then, hot and fierce. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Martinez. Don't be sorry. You did what we couldn't do. You stood up to them. You made them pay. The woman's voice grew stronger. My husband always said that justice delayed is justice denied. But maybe sometimes it just takes a while. Maybe sometimes it takes the right person at the right time. Your husband sounds like he was a wise man. He was, and he would have loved knowing that they finally got caught. Thank you, Mrs. Washington. Thank you for not giving up. After hanging up, Imani sat in the silence of her home. The house she'd bought because she'd earned it. The house that had become a battleground. The house that was finally truly hers. Outside Miller's house sat dark and empty, yellow police tape across the door. Tomorrow they'd bring in forensic accountants to tear apart every financial record. They'd interview every neighbor, every victim, every person who'd stayed silent out of fear. The truth was coming out. Finally. Completely. And Imani Washington, who just wanted a quiet place to call home, had become the catalyst for the biggest civil rights case the state had seen in 20 years. She thought about her father one more time. About the neighborhoods that had rejected him. About the quiet dignity with which he'd faced 1,000 small cruelties. About how he'd taught her to never start a fight but never back down from one either. Dad, she thought I didn't back down, and somehow she knew he heard her. The call from Rosa Martinez was only the first. Within 24 hours of Thompson and Miller's arrest, Imani's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Families she'd never met, people who'd left Oakwood years ago, all calling to say the same thing, thank you. We thought no one cared. We thought we were alone. By Thursday afternoon, Imani had documented 17 more families beyond Sarah's original list. 54 total. 54 families, Bismads, systematically destroyed by men who wore badges and called it justice. Rebecca Liu arrived at Imani's house Friday morning with 2 bankers' boxes full of documents seized from Pinnacle Development's offices. She dropped them on the dining room table with a heavy thud. You need to see this, all of it. Imani opened the first box. Inside were property files, each one meticulously organized with before and after appraisals, purchase agreements, renovation budgets, and sale records. The profit margins were staggering. Some properties flipped for 3 times what Pinnacle had paid. But it was the second box that made Imani's blood run cold. Personal files on every targeted family. Photos of their homes, their cars, their children. Background checks. Credit reports. Employment histories. Schedules noting when people left for work, when kids went to school, when houses sat empty. One file had a sticky note attached. Single mother works nights, no family support, should break easy. Jesus Christ, Imani whispered. They profiled everyone. Hunted them. It gets worse. Rebecca pulled out a leather-bound ledger from the bottom of the box. This is Thompson's personal record. Every property, every payment, and every split of profits. He kept a goddamn accounting of his crimes like it was a legitimate business. Imani opened the ledger. Thompson's handwriting was neat, precise, organized by date. Each entry listed the property address, the family name, the acquisition cost, which was what Pinnacle paid the resolution timeline, which was how long it took to force them out, and the final profit split. Thompson's cut averaged 40%. Miller got 20%. The rest was divided among Pinnacle's board members and several names Amani didn't recognize. Who are these other people? She pointed to initials scattered throughout DHMCGR. We're still identifying everyone. DH is Douglas Hart, the evidence room clerk. His daughter works for Pinnacle. Remember, MC is probably Michael Chen, David Chen's nephew, who works in the building permits office. JR, we're not sure yet, but we're getting warrants for everyone whose name appears more than 3 times. Dude, how many people were involved in this? We're estimating 15 to 20. It's not just a few corrupt individuals, Amani. It's a network. Thompson built a machine. Rebecca sat down heavily. The mayor wasn't lying when he said he didn't know. We've verified his story. He signed documents Thompson put in front of him without reading them carefully. Technically complicit, definitely negligent, but not actively criminal. He's cooperating fully now. What about the victims? Can we get them restitution? That's complicated. Legally, the property sales were voluntary. The families signed the contracts. Proving duress is difficult when the harassment was subtle, a citation here, a traffic stop there. None of it looks illegal in isolation. But taken together, it's a pattern of civil rights violations. Absolutely, which is why we're pursuing federal charges. Thompson and Miller are looking at conspiracy deprivation of rights under color of law wire fraud because they used electronic banking for the payments and potentially RICO charges if we can prove this was an ongoing criminal enterprise. Rebecca paused. But here's the thing. Thompson's lawyer is already arguing that they were just doing their jobs. That every citation was legitimate, every arrest was by the book, every traffic stop had probable cause. They're going to claim this was aggressive but legal policing, not systematic harassment. That's bullshit and you know it. I know it, you know it. But a jury, that's going to be the battle. We need the victims to testify. We need them to stand up in court and explain what it felt like to be targeted, to be hunted, to be driven from their homes. Without their voices, Thompson's lawyer will paint this as overzealous community enforcement that the state has mischaracterized. Amani thought about Rosa Martinez, her voice breaking as she talked about her dead husband. Thought about Sarah Jenkins nearly killed in a jail cell. Thought about all the families who'd simply vanished, too scared or too broken to ever speak up. I'll talk to them. I'll get them to testify. It's not that simple. Some of these families have moved to other states. Some are undocumented and terrified of any involvement with law enforcement. Some have criminal records themselves, minor things, old charges, but Thompson's lawyer will use that to discredit them. And some just want to move on, want to forget this ever happened. Rebecca met Amani's eyes. You can't force people to relive their trauma for a court case, even a righteous one. Then what do? We build the strongest case we can with the evidence we have. The ledger, the bank records the recorded confession from Wednesday's meeting. We get Peterson and Sarah to testify. They're both credible witnesses without criminal records, and we hope it's enough. That weekend, Amani started making calls. The first was to the Johnson family who'd been forced out 18 months ago. Mrs. Johnson answered on the third ring, her voice wary. Mrs. Washington, I saw you on the news. What you did was brave. I want to ask you to be brave too. The FBI needs witnesses, people willing to testify about what Thompson and Miller did. Silence on the line. Then, my son was 15 when Officer Miller arrested him for shoplifting. He didn't steal anything. We had the receipt, we had proof he'd paid, but Miller handcuffed him in the middle of the store anyway, made a huge scene, humiliated him in front of everyone he knew. My boy hasn't been the same since. Won't talk to police, won't make eye contact with officers, flinches when he sees a uniform. I'm so sorry. We moved to get away from that, to give him a fresh start. If we testify, if we go back and make this public, it brings it all back. It makes him relive it. Mrs. Johnson's voice cracked. I want justice, Mrs. Washington. I want those men to pay, but I won't sacrifice my son's peace of mind to get it. I'm sorry. She hung up. Amani tried 3 more families, got similar responses. Yes, we want them punished. No, we can't testify. We've moved on. We've rebuilt. Please don't ask us to go back. By Sunday night, she was exhausted and discouraged. She sat at her kitchen table with her phone in front of her, staring at the list of names, wondering if this whole thing was going to fall apart because the people who'd been hurt most couldn't bear to speak up. Her phone rang. Sarah Jenkins. I heard you're trying to recruit witnesses. Word travels fast. It's a small community of people who've been screwed by the system. We talk. Sarah paused. I'll testify. Whatever you need, I'm there. Sarah, you almost died. You were framed, arrested, nearly murdered in jail. No one would blame you for what? For staying silent, for letting them win. Sarah's laugh was bitter. Mrs. Washington, I've been fighting this fight for 2 years. I'm not stopping now just because they tried to kill me. If anything, that makes me more determined. It's going to be brutal. Thompson's lawyer will come after you. They'll dig into your past, your activism, your credibility. Let them. I've got nothing to hide. And more importantly, I've got documentation proving Miller planted those drugs. The FBI's forensic analysis found his prints on the bag, not mine. Found my prints nowhere on it because I never touched it. Sarah's voice grew stronger. I'm not the one who should be scared. They should be scared. Because I'm walking into that courtroom and telling the truth, and there's nothing they can do to stop me. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait until we win. Sarah paused. Listen, I've been thinking. The families who can't testify, who don't want to relive their trauma publicly, what if they could testify anonymously? What if we filed a class action civil suit alongside the criminal case? No cameras, no public testimony, just written depositions describing the pattern of harassment. The sheer number of similar stories would corroborate the criminal charges without forcing individuals into the spotlight. Imani sat up straighter. That's brilliant. A civil RICO suit against Thompson Miller Pinnacle, everyone involved. Force them to pay damages while the criminal case puts them in prison. Exactly. Hit them from both sides. And civil cases have a lower burden of proof preponderance of evidence instead of beyond reasonable doubt. Even if the criminal case somehow falls apart, we can still bankrupt them with civil judgments. I need to call Rebecca, and I need to find a civil rights attorney who specializes in class action suits. I know someone, Jessica Okafor. She's in Atlanta, handles police misconduct cases all over the Southeast. I worked with her on a voting rights case last year. She's aggressive, she's brilliant, and she hates corrupt cops with a passion. By Monday morning, Imani was on the phone with Jessica Okafor explaining the situation. Jessica listened in silence, then said, I'm in. Send me everything. I'll have a class action filing ready by end of week. Tuesday brought unexpected news. Rebecca called her voice tight with controlled excitement. We got JR, James Ridley County Tax Assessor. He's been artificially inflating property tax valuations on targeted homes, making it harder for families to afford to stay. When they fall behind on taxes, the county initiates lien proceedings, and guess who shows up to buy the liens at auction? Pinnacle. Bingo, Ridley gets a cut every time. He's rolling over, giving us everything. Names, dates, amounts. He's terrified of prison and willing to testify against everyone to reduce his sentence. How many people total are you arresting? By the end of the week, probably 12. And that's just the primary conspirators. We're still investigating secondary players. Lawyers who facilitated the transfers. Appraisers who undervalued properties. Mortgage brokers who denied refinancing to targeted families. This goes deeper than we initially thought. Wednesday afternoon, Imani was working from home when she heard a knock at her door. She checked the security camera. Tom Peterson stood on her porch holding a casserole dish. She opened the door cautiously. Mr. Peterson? Mrs. Washington, I know you're busy, but I wanted to bring you this. Beef stew, my wife's recipe. Thought you could use a home-cooked meal. He looked uncomfortable, like he wasn't sure of his welcome. And I wanted to tell you something. I've been talking to other neighbors. People who saw things over the years but didn't say anything. People like me who were cowards. We're forming a neighborhood coalition to support the investigation. We're calling it Oakwood Accountability Alliance. 15 families have already joined. Imani took the casserole dish, feeling its warmth through the ceramic. That's good. That's really good. It's not enough. Nothing we do now will undo the damage, but maybe it's a start. Peterson met her eyes. I testified to the FBI yesterday. Told them everything I witnessed over the years, not just what Frank did to you, but every other incident I ignored or explained away. It was hard, admitting I'd been complicit for so long. But I figured if you could stand up to them when it meant putting your life at risk, the least I could do is tell the truth when it cost me nothing but pride. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Tom, please, we're on the same side now. He turned to leave, then stopped. You know, I grew up in this neighborhood, been here my whole life. I always thought it was a good place, a safe place. Now I realize it was only safe for people who looked like me. That's something I'm going to have to live with. After he left, Imani ate the beef stew standing at her kitchen counter. It was good, rich, and savory, and made with care. The kind of meal that represented an apology too big for words. Thursday morning brought Thompson's arraignment. Imani sat in the back of the federal courtroom, watching as the man who'd terrorized dozens of families stood before a judge in an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed, his silver hair disheveled. He'd aged 10 years in a week. His lawyer, a sharp-suited man named Richard Morrison, argued passionately for bail. "Your Honor, Chief Thompson has served this community for 25 years. He has no prior criminal record, deep roots in the area, and no flight risk. He poses no danger to the community." So, the federal prosecutor, a woman named Helen Chen, stood up. "Your Honor, the defendant is charged with systematic civil rights violations, conspiracy, and abuse of power. He used his position as police chief to target vulnerable families, destroyed lives, and profited from their suffering. He's a danger to any community where he holds power. Additionally, we have evidence he attempted to intimidate witnesses and obstruct justice by ordering the transfer of evidence room materials just hours before federal agents arrived to seize them. He's shown consciousness of guilt and willingness to obstruct. We request he be held without bail." The judge, a black woman in her 60s named Gloria Hawkins, looked at Thompson for a long moment. "Bail denied. The defendant will remain in federal custody pending trial." Morrison stood. "Your Honor, that's..." "Counsel, I've read the charges. I've reviewed the preliminary evidence. Your client is accused of using his badge to destroy families for profit. That's not a man I'm comfortable releasing into any community. Bail is denied. Next case." Thompson's face went white. As marshals led him away, his eyes scanned the courtroom and landed on Imani. For 3 seconds, they locked gazes. She saw fear there now, mixing with the hatred. Saw him realize that his world had truly collapsed, that there was no coming back from this. She didn't look away. Didn't flinch. Just watched him disappear through the door that led to holding cells, to the reality of being the criminal instead of the cop. Miller's arraignment was next. He looked worse than Thompson. His face still showed bruises from being slammed into the conference table, and his usual cocky demeanor had been replaced by sullen silence. His public defender, a young man who looked overwhelmed, argued weakly for bail and was similarly denied. As Miller was led away, he didn't look at Imani, didn't look at anyone, just kept his eyes on the floor, a defeated man who'd finally learned what powerlessness felt like. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Imani tried to avoid them, but one persistent journalist from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution cornered her. "Mrs. Washington, you've become the face of this case. How does it feel to have brought down such a powerful conspiracy? I didn't bring it down alone. There were dozens of people who contributed evidence, who found courage to speak up, who refused to let intimidation silence them. This is their victory, not mine. But you were the catalyst. You're the one who moved next door to Officer Miller and refused to be driven away. I was the one in the right place at the right time. Any of those other 54 families would have done the same thing if they'd had the resources and protection I had. The real story isn't about me. It's about a system that allowed this to happen for 3 years. It's about how many complaints were ignored, how many red flags were missed, how many people in positions of authority looked the other way." What would you say to other communities facing similar situations? Imani thought about that. About all the Oakwoods across America, all the Millers and Thompsons who used badges as weapons, all the families too scared or too tired to fight back. Document everything. Take photos, save emails, record conversations where legal. Build your case methodically, and find allies, journalists, lawyers, federal investigators, people outside the local system who can help. Don't fight alone. You can't win alone. That night, Jessica Okafor called with an update on the civil case. "I've got 32 families willing to join the class action. Most of them wouldn't testify in the criminal case, but they're comfortable with written depositions. I'm filing on Monday for $100 million in damages." $100 million. Compensatory damages for property losses, emotional distress, lost wages from having to relocate. Punitive damages to send a message that this kind of systematic abuse won't be tolerated. And we're naming everyone: Thompson, Miller, Pinnacle Development, every board member, the evidence room clerk, the tax assessor, everyone who touched this conspiracy. Jessica paused. "Even if we only recover a fraction of that amount, it'll bankrupt them. They'll lose everything just like their victims did." "Good. You sound angry." "I am angry. I'm furious that this happened. I'm furious that it took so long to stop. I'm furious that some of these families will never recover what they lost." Imani took a breath. "But I'm also hopeful, because for the first time in 3 years, there's accountability, there's justice, and that matters." The following week brought a steady stream of developments. Michael Chen resigned from the permits office rather than face charges. Douglas Hart pleaded guilty to evidence tampering and agreed to testify. 2 Pinnacle Development board members were arrested. David Chen, the retired councilman, fled to his daughter's house in California and was arrested by federal marshals at the airport trying to board a flight to Taiwan. Each arrest made headlines. Each headline brought more attention. Soon national news was covering the story. Civil rights organizations issued statements. The governor Imani's boss held a press conference promising comprehensive review of all municipal police departments in the state. And through it all, Imani kept working, kept documenting, kept building the case. Sarah Jenkins was released from protective custody and returned to her paralegal work, though now with federal protection and a pending lawsuit of her own against Miller and the county jail for the attempted murder. Tom Peterson's Oakwood Accountability Alliance grew to 45 members. Rosa Martinez started a support group for families who'd been forced out, helping them navigate the civil suit process and find counseling for trauma. 1 month after the arrests, Rebecca called Imani with news that changed everything. We've been digging into Pinnacle's corporate structure, following the money through shell companies and offshore accounts. Guess what we found? Tell me. The ultimate beneficial owner of Pinnacle Development Group, hidden under 6 layers of LLCs and trusts, is State Senator William Garrett. Imani felt the floor drop out from under her. Garrett, he's on the Criminal Justice Reform Committee. He's been pushing police accountability legislation for 5 years. Apparently while profiting from police corruption behind the scenes. We're estimating his cut of the Oakwood operation alone was over $5 million. And Imani Oakwood wasn't the only location. We've identified similar patterns in 4 other towns across the state. Same model, same tactics, different corrupt cops doing the dirty work. Garrett was running a statewide criminal enterprise. Oh my God. We're arresting him tonight. The governor's going to have to comment. This is going to explode. Does the governor know I'm involved? He knows. I briefed him personally this morning. He asked me to tell you that he's proud of you and grateful you exposed this before it went any further. Rebecca paused. He also asked if you'd be willing to testify before the state legislature about systemic corruption in local law enforcement. Help them understand how to prevent this from happening again. I'll do it. And one more thing. Sarah Jenkins asked me to tell you something. She's been contacted by families in 2 of those other towns where Garrett was operating. They want to know if they can join the class action suit. They want to know if there's hope for justice in their cases, too. Imani closed her eyes. Felt the weight of it, not just Oakwood anymore, but a statewide fight. More families, more victims, more battles ahead, but also more allies. More people finding courage. More light shining into corners where corruption had festered in darkness. Tell them yes, she said. Tell them there's always hope, as long as someone's willing to stand up and fight. That night, Imani sat in her living room watching the news coverage of Senator Garrett's arrest. Federal agents leading him from his suburban mansion in handcuffs, his wife screaming at reporters, his career imploding in real time. The crawl at the bottom of the screen read, "Breaking State Senator Arrested in Massive Corruption Scheme." Federal investigation expands to multiple counties. More arrests expected. Her phone rang. Private number. Hello? Mrs. Washington, this is Marcus, the maintenance worker at Pinnacle that Sarah told you about, the one they framed with drugs. Marcus, how are you? Out on bail, charges being dismissed now that the truth's come out. I wanted to thank you. Wanted you to know that I spent 3 weeks in jail thinking my life was over, thinking I'd never see my kids again except through prison glass. Then I saw the news, saw them arrest Thompson and Miller, saw that someone finally believed us, finally fought back. His voice broke. You saved my life, Mrs. Washington. You saved my family. I don't know how to repay that. You don't have to repay anything. Just live your life. Be there for your kids. And if you ever see someone else being targeted, being harassed, being driven out, speak up. Don't stay silent. That's how we stop this from happening again. I will. I promise I will. He paused. My oldest son asked me yesterday what I learned from all this. I told him I learned that justice is slow, but it's real. That bad people sometimes win for a while, but good people eventually win forever. Was I right? Imani thought about Thompson and Miller in jail, about Garrett's arrest, about 54 families who might finally get restitution, about a system being forced to confront its own corruption. Yeah, she said. You were right. After hanging up, she walked through her house, the house that had become a battleground, the house that had cost her sleep and safety and peace of mind. She stood at the front window looking out at Miller's empty house across the property line. Tomorrow a family was moving in. The Johnsons, the same family that couldn't testify. They'd called Imani 3 days ago, asked if the neighborhood was safe, now asked if they could come home. She'd helped them negotiate with Pinnacle's bankruptcy trustee to buy back their house at a fair price. They were returning, reclaiming what had been taken. That felt like justice, too. Imani's phone buzzed one more time. Text from Rebecca, grand jury indictments came back. Thompson, 47 counts. Miller, 39 counts. Garrett, 128 counts. Trial starts in 6 months. We're going to bury them. Imani typed back, good, let them see what accountability looks like. She set down her phone and looked at her reflection in the dark window. The woman staring back was different from the one who'd moved here 6 weeks ago. Harder, wearier, but also stronger. More certain of who she was and what she stood for. Frank Miller had thrown water in her face trying to wash her away. Instead, he'd unleashed a flood that swept away his entire criminal empire. And Imani Washington, who'd just wanted a home, had become the person who proved that no one, no matter how powerful, no matter how protected, was truly untouchable when someone had the courage to say enough. The trial began on a Monday in October, exactly 6 months after the arrests. The federal courthouse in Atlanta was surrounded by news trucks, protesters holding signs that read "Justice for Oakwood" and "Prosecute Corrupt Cops," and a line of people waiting to get into the public gallery that stretched around the block. Imani arrived early, with Rebecca bypassing the crowds through a side entrance reserved for witnesses. The courtroom was massive dark wood paneling, high ceilings, the kind of space designed to make people feel the weight of federal justice. Thompson, Miller, and Garrett sat at 3 separate defense tables with their legal teams forbidden from communicating with each other under the terms of their bail revocations. Thompson looked gaunt. Prison had stripped away his authority, his polish, everything that had made him intimidating. Miller kept his eyes on the table, jaw clenched, still angry but now impotent. Garrett, the state senator, wore an expensive suit but couldn't hide the defeat in his posture. The prosecution's opening statement was delivered by Helen Chen, the federal prosecutor who'd argued against their bail. She stood before the jury, 8 women, 4 men, racially diverse, ranging in age from 25 to 70, and told them a story. This case is about power, about men who were given badges and authority and public trust and who weaponized all of it for profit. For 3 years, the defendants ran a criminal enterprise disguised as law enforcement. They identified vulnerable families, targeted them with systematic harassment, and forced them from their homes so they could profit from the sales. They destroyed lives. They destroyed dreams. They destroyed the very concept of justice they were sworn to protect. Helen walked to the evidence table, picked up Thompson's leather ledger. This is the defendant Thompson's own record of his crime. 54 families, 54 properties, over $15 million in profit. Each entry represents a family driven from their home. Each entry represents theft disguised as policing. Each entry represents a betrayal of everything a badge is supposed to mean. She turned back to the jury. The defense will tell you that every citation was legal, every arrest was by the book, every action was justified, and technically individually, some of that might be true. But patterns tell the truth that individual actions hide. When every family targeted happens to be a minority family, when every citation happens to come right before a property sale, when every arrest happens to benefit the same development company, when bank deposits happen to follow every forced sale. That's not coincidence, that's conspiracy, that's criminal enterprise, that's what we're going to prove beyond any doubt. The defense attorneys each gave their own openings. Morrison, representing Thompson, argued his client was simply a dedicated police chief maintaining community standards. Miller's attorney claimed he was following orders from his superior. Garrett's team insisted he was a passive investor who had no knowledge of illegal activities. None of it mattered. Not after Helen started presenting denying evidence. The first week was all deadbolt documents, bank records, property transfers, the ledger emails between Garrett and Pinnacle board members discussing problem properties and resolution timelines. The jury's faces grew harder with each revelation. The second week brought the witnesses. Tom Peterson testified first. Fit, his voice shaking but determined. I watched Frank Miller harass every minority family that moved onto our street for 5 years. I told myself it wasn't my business. I told myself he was just being thorough. I told myself lies because the truth was uncomfortable. Then I watched him spray Mrs. Washington with a hose like she was trash to be washed away, and I couldn't lie to myself anymore. Morrison tried to shake him on cross-examination. Mr. Peterson, isn't it true you never reported any of this alleged harassment at the time? That's true. I was a coward. I'm not proud of that. But I'm here now telling the truth. How convenient that you found courage now after federal investigators got involved. It's not convenient. It's necessary. I'm here because I can't live with myself if I stay silent any longer. Peterson looked directly at Thompson. I've known you for 12 years, Chief. I voted for you twice. I trusted you, and you betrayed everything that badge represents. Someone had to say it out loud. The courtroom was silent as Peterson stepped down. Sarah Jenkins testified on Wednesday of the second week. She wore a simple blue dress and no jewelry, her box braids pulled back. Her face calm despite the cameras in the crowd and Thompson's lawyer waiting to attack her credibility. Helen started gently. "Ms. Jenkins, can you tell the jury about your arrest?" Officer Miller pulled me over for a broken taillight that wasn't broken, made me get out of the car, patted me down, then went back to search my vehicle alone. 3 minutes later, he came back with a duffel bag full of drugs I'd never seen before. I was arrested, charged with trafficking, and held in county jail. What happened in that jail? I was placed in a cell with 3 women awaiting trial for violent crimes. One of them had a weapon hidden in the cell. I believe I was meant to be killed and have it look like inmate violence. Morrison stood. Objection? Speculation? Judge Hawkins looked at Sarah. "Ms. Jenkins, do you have evidence supporting this belief?" "The FBI found a shiv made from a toothbrush hidden in my cellmate's mattress during my transfer to federal custody. The intake officer told federal agents it was unusual for a first-time offender to be placed in that cell, and I received an anonymous tip warning me I was in danger." "I'll allow it. Continue." Sarah looked directly at Miller. "Officer Miller tried to kill me because I was investigating his crimes. He planted drugs on me, arrested me, and arranged for me to die in custody, but I'm still here. I'm still testifying, and nothing he did could stop the truth." Miller's face went red, but he didn't look up. On cross-examination, Morrison tried to paint Sarah as a biased activist with an agenda against police. "Ms. Jenkins, isn't it true you've been involved in anti-police protests?" "I've been involved in police accountability protests. That's different." "You've publicly called for defunding police departments." "I've called for reallocating resources to social services and mental health response, and I've called for holding corrupt officers accountable, yes." "So you came into this investigation already believing police were corrupt?" Sarah leaned forward. "No, sir. I came into this investigation after documenting 37 families who'd been systematically harassed by Officer Miller and Chief Thompson. I didn't assume they were corrupt. I proved it." The gallery erupted in applause. Judge Hawkins gavelled for silence but didn't reprimand the crowd. Amani testified on Thursday. She'd been dreading this moment for weeks, but when Helen called her name, she walked to the witness stand with her head high and her voice steady. "Mrs. Washington, please tell the jury what happened when you moved to Oakwood Estates." Amani recounted everything: the immediate suspicion, the escalating harassment, the fake citations, the threatening texts, and finally, the water attack. As she spoke, the courtroom video screens showed security footage of Miller spraying her down, his laughter audible, her humiliation visible. Several jurors looked away. One woman wiped her eyes. "Mrs. Washington," Helen said quietly, "why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you sell the house and move somewhere safer? Because that's what they wanted. That's what they'd done to 53 families before me, and I had resources they didn't have. Education connections, the governor's office behind me. If I left, if I let them win, what message did that send to every other family being targeted? That power always wins, that badges protect criminals, that there's no point in fighting back." Amani looked at Thompson, then at Miller. "I stayed because someone had to, because leaving would have been easier, but winning was necessary." Morrison's cross-examination was aggressive. "Mrs. Washington, isn't it true you work for Governor Mitchell?" "I'm a senior policy advisor, yes." "And isn't it true the governor has been critical of local police departments?" "The governor supports police accountability, yes." "So you had political motivation to expose alleged police corruption?" "And I had personal motivation. I was assaulted in my own yard by a police officer who thought his badge made him untouchable. My motivation was justice, not politics." "Yet you immediately involved federal investigators, the governor's office, and media outlets. You orchestrated a takedown." "I documented crimes and reported them to appropriate authorities. That's not orchestration, that's citizenship." "You recorded Chief Thompson and Officer Miller without their knowledge." "Under state law, I'm allowed to record conversations I'm part of, which I did, and during that recording they admitted to years of criminal activity. That's evidence, not entrapment." Morrison tried several more angles, but Amani held firm on every point. When she finally stepped down after 2 hours of testimony, Rebecca gave her a small nod that said, "You did good." The third week brought victim testimony. Rosa Martinez took the stand, her hands shaking, her voice breaking as she described watching her husband's health deteriorate under the stress of Miller's harassment. "He had a heart attack 3 months after we sold our house. The doctor said it was genetic, but I know better. I know what stress does. I know what it's like to lie awake every night wondering what citation they'll invent next, what violation they'll find, when the police will show up with another excuse to fine us." Rosa looked at the jury through tears. "My husband died because these men wanted to make money. That's all we were to them, dollar signs. Our home, our life, our family, none of it mattered. Just profit." Marcus, the maintenance worker, testified about his arrest and the planted drugs. The Johnson family testified about their son being handcuffed and humiliated in public. The Patel family described their teenage daughter being followed by police cars every time she drove to school. 11 families total took the stand over 3 days. 11 stories of harassment, intimidation, and systematic abuse. By the end, 3 jurors were openly crying. The 4th week was expert testimony, forensic accountants explaining the money trail, civil rights attorneys explaining systematic discrimination patterns, banking experts showing how the shell companies funneled money to the defendants. It was technical and detailed and devastating. The prosecution rested after 16 days of testimony. The defense tried to fight back. Thompson took the stand and insisted everything he did was legitimate police work. "I was maintaining community standards. Every citation was valid. Every arrest had probable cause. If people couldn't meet those standards, that's not my fault." Helen destroyed him on cross-examination. "Chief Thompson, of the 54 families you targeted, how many were white?" "I don't recall exact, Brown. 0. The answer is 0. Every single family was black, Hispanic, or Asian. Is that a coincidence? Those were the families who had violations. Or those were the families whose properties Pinnacle wanted to buy. Chief Thompson, you received over $600,000 in cash deposits over 3 years. Where did that money come from? Consulting fees, private security work. For companies that don't exist, on dates that coincide exactly with forced property sales. That's not consulting, that's payment for criminal services." Helen held up the ledger. "Your own handwriting documents every crime. You kept a record of your conspiracy. Why?" Thompson had no answer. Miller didn't testify. His lawyer knew he'd crumble under cross-examination. Garrett took the stand and claimed ignorance of everything, insisting he was just a passive investor. But Helen produced emails where Garrett explicitly discussed accelerating acquisition timelines and increasing pressure on holdouts. The defense rested after 1 week. Closing arguments came on a Friday in late November. Morrison argued that aggressive policing wasn't criminal, that property sales were voluntary, that the prosecution had criminalized legitimate law enforcement. Miller's attorney argued he was following orders. Garrett's team argued he was too far removed from operations to be criminally liable. Helen Chen stood up for the prosecution's closing and spoke for 90 minutes. She walked the jury through every piece of evidence, every testimony, every connection between the defendants' actions and the profits they made. She held up photos of the families who'd been forced out, smiling pictures from before, then pictures of them packing boxes, leaving homes they'd loved, dreams destroyed. "The defense wants you to see this as technicalities and legal interpretations, but look at these faces. These are the real people whose lives were destroyed. Mrs. Martinez's husband is dead. Marcus spent 3 weeks in jail for crimes he didn't commit. Sarah Jenkins nearly died in a cell. The Johnson's son won't make eye contact with police officers anymore. These aren't abstractions. These are consequences." She turned to face the defendants. Thompson, Miller, and Garrett made millions of dollars by weaponizing the justice system against vulnerable families. They turned the badges into tools of oppression and profit. They betrayed every principle of equal justice under law, and now they want you to believe it was all just good police work. Helen looked back at the jury. "Don't let them hide behind badges anymore. Don't let them pretend systematic abuse was legitimate enforcement. Look at the evidence. Look at the pattern. Look at the victims. Then deliver the only verdict that honors truth and justice, guilty on all counts." The jury got the case on Monday afternoon, deliberated for 4 days. On Friday morning, Imani sat in the courtroom between Sarah and Rebecca, holding her breath as the jury filed back in. The foreperson, an older black woman who'd been a teacher for 30 years, stood when Judge Hawkins asked if they'd reached a verdict. "We have, Your Honor. On the charge of conspiracy to violate civil rights, how do you find the defendant, Robert Thompson?" "Guilty." The courtroom erupted. Judge Hawkins gavelled for order, but Imani barely heard it over the roaring in her ears. "Guilty." They'd said guilty. The foreperson continued reading. "Guilty on deprivation of rights under color of law. Guilty on wire fraud. Guilty on conspiracy to commit extortion. 47 counts, 47 guilty verdicts. Miller 39 guilty verdicts. Garrett 128 guilty verdicts. By the time the reading finished, Thompson was slumped in his chair, Miller had his head in his hands, and Garrett was openly weeping. Judge Hawkins scheduled sentencing for 6 weeks later and remanded all 3 defendants to custody immediately. As marshals led them away in handcuffs, Imani felt Sarah grab her hand and squeeze. "We did it," Sarah whispered. "We actually did it." In the hallway outside, reporters mobbed them. Imani found herself pushed to the front microphones in her face, questions shouted from every direction. "Mrs. Washington, how do you feel about the verdict? Grateful, relieved, and sad that it took this long that so many families had to suffer before these men were held accountable. What would you say to other victims of police corruption? Document everything, build your case, find allies, and don't give up. Justice is slow, but it's real. These men thought they were untouchable, and today a jury proved they were wrong. Will you continue working on police reform? I'll continue working on justice. Whether that's police reform or civil rights or community development, I'll keep fighting to make sure what happened in Oakwood never happens anywhere else." The sentencing hearing 6 weeks later was emotional and cathartic. Judge Hawkins allowed victim impact statements, and 23 families spoke. Rosa Martinez talked about her husband's empty chair at Thanksgiving. Marcus described his children asking why Daddy was in jail if he didn't do anything wrong. Sarah explained the nightmares she still had about the shiv-wielding cellmate. When everyone had spoken, Judge Hawkins addressed the defendants. "You 3 men were given extraordinary power, the power to enforce laws to protect communities to serve justice. Instead, you corrupted that power for profit. You targeted the vulnerable, exploited the system, and betrayed the public trust in ways that shake the foundations of justice itself. Your crimes weren't victimless technicalities. They destroyed lives, destroyed families, and destroyed faith in institutions we depend on to function as a society." She looked at Thompson. "Robert Thompson, you organized and led this enterprise. You recruited participants, coordinated operations, and profited most directly. I sentence you to 27 years in federal prison." Thompson showed no reaction, but his lawyer put a hand on his shoulder. "Frank Miller, you were the weapon Thompson wielded. You harassed families, planted evidence, and attempted murder. I sentence you to 22 years in federal prison." Miller's jaw clenched, but he stayed silent. "William Garrett, you provided the financial infrastructure and expanded operations statewide. Your betrayal of public office is particularly egregious. I sentence you to 35 years in federal prison." Garrett's composure finally broke. He sobbed openly as marshals led him away. Outside the courthouse, Imani stood with Sarah Rebecca, Tom Peterson, and a crowd of families who'd been victimized. Someone started applauding, then someone else. Within seconds, the entire crowd was clapping, cheering, crying, hugging. Rosa Martinez approached Imani with tears streaming down her face. "My husband can rest now. He can finally rest knowing they paid for what they did." "I'm so sorry for your loss, Mrs. Martinez." "Don't be sorry. Be proud. You did what we couldn't do. You stood up when standing up felt impossible. You gave us justice." Rosa hugged her tightly. "Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you." The civil suit settled 3 weeks later. Pinnacle Development and its associated shell companies agreed to pay $87 million in damages to be divided among the 54 families. It wasn't enough to undo the harm, but it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was restitution. The Johnson family used their settlement to buy back their house, the one Imani had helped them negotiate for, and moved back to Oakwood just before Christmas. Their son stood in the front yard looking at the house, and Imani saw something shift in his face. Not quite healing, but maybe the beginning of it. Tom Peterson's Oakwood Accountability Alliance grew to 90 members and began working with the new police chief, a black woman named Diane Foster, who'd been brought in specifically to reform the department. She fired 4 officers with questionable records, installed new accountability measures, and required implicit bias training for everyone. Sarah Jenkins started a nonprofit called Justice Restoration, helping victims of police corruption, and in other communities navigate the reporting process, connect with federal investigators, and find the courage to speak up. She called Imani weekly, with updates on cases in 3 states where families were fighting back against corrupt cops using the Oakwood playbook as a guide. The state legislature passed comprehensive police reform legislation that Imani helped draft. Body cameras became mandatory. Evidence room procedures were overhauled. Outside review boards for officer misconduct became standard. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Imani testified before Congress about systematic corruption in local law enforcement, about the need for federal oversight, about how profit motives could corrupt entire departments. Her testimony was cited in 5 different federal reform proposals. But the moment that mattered most came 4 months after the sentencing on a Saturday morning in early spring. Imani was in her front yard planting flowers, the same flowers Miller had said would die, the same spot where she'd been standing when he sprayed her with the hose. The flowers from last year had survived the winter. They were blooming now, bright and defiant. A car pulled up. A young black couple stepped out, with a toddler looking at the house 2 doors down. The calle their house where the Martinez family had lived before they were forced out. The woman saw Imani and waved. "Excuse me, we're thinking of buying this house. Is this a good neighborhood?" Imani stood up, brushed the dirt from her hands, and smiled. "It's getting better. Come here, let me tell you about the community." She spent 30 minutes talking to them about Oakwood, about its history, about what had happened, about the changes being made, about the Accountability Alliance and the new police chief and the families returning, about how justice had been hard-won but real. "So it's safe now, Sam?" the man asked. "For families like ours." "It's safer. It's not perfect, nowhere is. But there are people here who fought to make it right, and who'll keep fighting to keep it right. You won't be alone. You won't be unprotected. And if anyone tries what they tried before, they'll find out what consequences look like." The couple looked at each other, then at their daughter, then back at the house. "We're going to make an offer, the woman said. "Thank you for being honest with us." After they left, Imani went back to her flowers. She was on her knees in the dirt when she heard footsteps behind her. "Those look good," Tom Peterson's voice. "You were right and Frank was wrong. They survived." "They did. Just like you. Just like all of us." Imani stood up. "Tom, I've been meaning to tell you something. What you did testifying, starting the alliance, standing up, when it mattered, that took real courage." "Not as much courage as you had." "Different courage. I had resources and protection you didn't have. You testified knowing you'd face judgment from neighbors, knowing you'd lose friendships, knowing people would call you a traitor. That's harder than what I did." Tom nodded slowly. "My grandson asked me yesterday what I'd learned from all this. Know what I told him?" "What?" "That being a good person isn't about never making mistakes. It's about fixing them when you finally see them clearly." He looked at Miller's still empty house. "I was complicit for years. Can't undo that. But I can make damn sure it never happens again. That's going to be my work for however many years I have left." "That's good work." "It is. And Mrs. Washington, thank you for showing an old man that it's never too late to do the right thing." After he left, Imani stayed in her garden for another hour, planting flowers, pulling weeds, making things grow. Her phone buzzed with messages, Sarah asking about a case in Tennessee. Rebecca, with an update on appeal proceedings, Rosa inviting her to a memorial service for her husband. She'd respond to all of them eventually. But for now, she just wanted to be here in this space she'd fought for, on this land she'd earned in this neighborhood that was slowly healing. A police cruiser drove by. The new officer, young professional, respectful, waved at her. She waved back. Not perfect, but better. Imani thought about the night Miller had sprayed her with water, about how humiliated and powerless she'd felt in that moment. Thought about his words, "I am the cops. I'm untouchable. You're nobody." She'd proven him wrong on every count. She wasn't nobody. She was the senior advisor who'd exposed a statewide criminal conspiracy. She was the neighbor who'd refused to be driven away. She was the witness whose testimony had helped send 3 men to prison for decades. She was the catalyst who'd given 54 families justice and shown countless others that fighting back was possible. But more than any of that, she was someone who'd seen injustice and hadn't looked away. Who'd been afraid but acted anyway. Who'd understood that silence was complicity and noise was necessary. She was proof that one person with courage could change everything. Her father had been right all those years ago, never start a fight, but never back down from one either. Imani hadn't started this fight. Miller had the moment he decided his badge gave him the right to terrorize his neighbor. Thompson had when he built a criminal empire behind the shield of public trust. Garrett had when he chose profit over people, but Imani had finished it. She packed up her gardening tools, brushed off her jeans, and walked inside her house. Her home. The place she'd earned twice once, by buying it once, by defending it. On her refrigerator was a photo from the courthouse steps after the verdict. 50 people crammed into the frame arms around each other, smiling through tears. Victims and witnesses and allies. People who'd found each other through trauma and built something stronger than what they'd lost. Below the photo, someone had written in marker, "Justice delayed is not justice denied. Sometimes it just takes the right person at the right time." Imani smiled at that, added her own line beneath it, "And sometimes the right person is just someone who refuses to leave." Her phone buzzed one more time. Message from an unknown number. Mrs. Washington, my name is Jennifer Torres. I live in Riverside County, 2 hours north of you. Something is happening here that sounds like what happened in Oakwood. Police harassment, families being forced out, property values being manipulated. I don't know what to do. Can you help? Imani stared at the message for a long moment. She could ignore it. Could say she'd done enough. Fought enough, risked enough. She'd earned her peace, but she thought about Rosa Martinez's husband, about Sarah Jenkins in that jail cell, about the Johnson boy who couldn't look at police officers, about every family whose dreams had been stolen by men who thought badges made them gods. She thought about her father's voice. Sometimes justice takes a while. Sometimes it takes the right person at the right time. Imani typed back, yes, I can help. Tell me everything. Because that's what you did when you'd learned what power really meant. Not the power to control people, but the power to stand with them. Not the power to intimidate, but the power to resist intimidation. Not the power of a badge, but the power of truth spoken clearly and firmly and without fear. Frank Miller had tried to wash her away with water. Instead, she'd become a force of nature. And she wasn't finished yet.